You guys, I always try to put a little humor into everything. This is my Trump mug. You know, it's black until you fill it up with hot water, and then Mr. Trump appears to give you the thumbs up. Anyway, good for me. I didn't put any notes in front of me, so this should be fun. Guys, last video I stressed the importance of Alberta independence as a means of cultural self-defense. You've probably heard the United Nations talk about cultural genocide, and that is something that Alberta has to protect itself against. That's why it does need to separate from the new Canada. And, one of the questions that came up too was, well, what culture would Alberta be trying to preserve? Well, actually, that is a good question. And guys, I'm not making a historical thesis for you today. This is not necessarily a historical education journey, but my Edmonton Eskimos hat reminds me of exactly why. Because when they make a sports team, right? Like, I think people get this, right? The idea is you would name your team after something that you perceive to be a very powerful, very strong, very admirable. The Hawks, the Tigers, it's going to be something like that. That's even maybe something that's feared, like the Raiders or something, but something that's strong. And in this case, in Alberta, people chose the Eskimos. Actually, I think that is a little bit of a technical misnomer. What Alberta people, who they most admired, were the Dene. So maybe people don't know, but Eskimo would be a little further up north. Oh boy, I can't wait to feel some comments about this. And Dene would be, this is what people say. They say, oh, Dene is kind of like, they are half, they're sort of like half Inuit and half Plains Indians. Okay, so anyway, please don't comment if you... The point being here is that this is a good example of what culture Alberta is trying to stop things like taking away our Eskimos because of the new Canada political correctness, identitarianism, and all of this weird shit that turns our Eskimo into whatever they're called now, the Edmonton Elks. Why would you choose elks? Well, because they're a very powerful, strong animal that is hardy and can sustain the cold weather. And that's, again, you're just choosing something that you admire, right? That's considered powerful, and that's what we did with Eskimos. Although I guess it should have been the Edmonton Dene, but then it wouldn't have the EE kind of sound to it. So Edmonton Eskimos, right? So guys, I'm going to get another sip of coffee before I go on about this, because actually this does lead to something, which is describing to you why Alberta does indeed have a different culture that, boy, I got to watch the word unique, because, just here, let's wake up. Okay, and Mr. J didn't put any notes in front of him, so this should be great to see how I do in the first thing in the morning. The Alberta, I am steering clear of saying unique culture, okay, because what has happened in Canada is Quebec had a separation deal, and then they got really hung up on special and unique, and the word unique, and what'll happen is a lot of people in the West will get cringe when they heard the word unique. Well, that's not also that important. It's just a question of what is Alberta's recipe and why it is one of the last places maybe in all of North America. It's one place where the sort of pre-globalist values are still some remnant, but man, are they falling apart fast. However, the last video I did mention mass migration of non-Christendom peoples, but this video is more of a walkthrough to the native thing. So, I know a lot of viewers, right? You're not Alberta people or even Canada people, and some of this is for American friends too. But Canada didn't have, we didn't have any conquering. We didn't have the Indian Wars. In particular, I should say Alberta. A lot of the first peoples there were Dene people up north, Cree for sure, the Plains Cree, and for the most part, the British and the original settlers, not all British, but the original settlers, we had a fairly peaceful, business-like, very polite, for most part, very good relationship with the Cree and the Plains people, and actually we got along just well. There is also the Blackfoot, and I don't even know if I want to get into this. But anyway, point being is that for the most part, the settlers and the Cree people, the prairie native people of the prairies, in fact, got along quite well. And almost everything that ever happened was done by treaty, by agreement, by mutual business interests. Alberta also has, could be a little topic about the Métis people. So let's just skip past that right now. But point being is that right from the get-go, we had a different experience than would have people in the, keep in mind in Alberta, sometimes we call Toronto and Montreal, we call that out east. I know if you live out there, you probably call yourself Central Canada, but to us, you're all out east, okay? And out east, they had a much different experience, just right there establishing the very beginnings of Alberta. And Saskatchewan was a lot like this too. So the other part of our recipe is very obviously geography. And if you want to look at a map, and I always think it's interesting, our flag has the wheat fields, the mountains. We've got St. George's Cross up there as well, which, by the way, is again a reference to our Christian heritage. And but geography, of course, is unique. I guess can we say geopolitical? So this is something also a lot of people maybe don't know, is that a lot of Alberta, if you actually look at North America, it's really regionally, it's not as divided as the actual borders. Regionally, this was the prairies. Well, and where you can see that too is in the rodeo. You can actually see that in the ranch land culture. It goes as far, it goes really up to Grand Prairie, all the way down Alberta, famous Calgary Stampede, which I do believe was the biggest one, all the way down through the United States and down into Mexico. A lot of that heritage actually goes all the way down into Mexico. And so this is something else too, is that a lot of Alberta was settled by American people, by people from the USA. And now, yes, those many of those people came from Europe. I just look at my own family. We actually go from one side of the family is through Tennessee, Georgia. I'm not going to get all of these. They were like a Scots-Irish people, and sometimes called hillbillies. But actually, they were kind of like migrant farm people, migrant rancher people. And then all the way up through the U.S. into Alberta and also parts of BC as well. And, and then another side of the family is, so this is another establishing Alberta's culture was, first of all, a very large American migration, American influence. And again, especially with the ranching, didn't always observe that Canada-U.S. border they made. Trump calls whatever that big phony border that they just cut across. But actually, from Montana to down to Texas up to Alberta is really was a lot of the same people sharing the same cowboy lifestyle. Alberta also as well had migration of so those were freed slaves, if you go back far enough, that came from the southern part of the United States. And then after slavery was abolished, a lot of the guys became, cowboys, right? Some of that cowboy culture actually does, again, stretch all the way from Edmonton, Alberta, all the way down to parts of Mexico. And so Alberta also as well had the influx of, which would be, black Americans who were descendants of slavery. And, when I grew up, we had a family. I want to say that was like Stony Plain. And it does seem to surprise people. Like they'll say, I was in Alberta and I saw a black cowboy. Like they'll say it like it's a weird thing, but it's like, no, it's not weird. Their family has been here for 200 years, but yes, actually, they probably they came from the freed slaves that became a lot of the cowboys and ranch people and farming people, and then eventually migrated up into Alberta. So they're very, very much the original Alberta people. And what else too? We have, like one side of my family would come from the Germanic and Norwegian, Scandinavian people, who again we actually share a lot with the USA. What happened there is so that's, by the way, is one of the establishing phases of Alberta, which is when they put together land parcels, and then they discovered that there's a problem, which is that a lot of people didn't know how to farm they didn't understand cold weather farming. So the appeal was made, the invitations were made to particularly Germans, northern Germany, Scandinavia, and a lot of those Germanic and Scandinavian people, of course, they were experts, much like my great-grandfather. That's what they did. They were experts in cold climate farming. So actually they knew exactly how to farm in a way that you would get the most out of, which is pretty much just 3 months of, it's really honestly 7-8 months of what most normal people would call winter, and then you got 4 months. A lot of people also don't realize is that Alberta is shockingly cold through the winter, and then they're surprised to find out that Alberta can be wicked hot in the summer. Oh my God! I think 43 is the hottest day I can remember walking around outside, and probably well, they said minus 50. It was minus 51 or 52. But you know how they go, oh, but that's like 60 in the wind chill. That's the time I got a frostbite on my face. But yeah, so that is actually also another part of the recipe that established our culture. And that's why we have, like, you know, towns in Alberta where everybody's from Iceland, like Icelandic people. And like the whole town is all Iceland. To this day, they're all Icelandic people. Not that they all can speak Iceland, you know, or whatever, but all of these people came, and they split actually pretty evenly. The family split quite evenly. These cold weather farmers who migrated to Alberta, Saskatchewan, as well as Minnesota, Michigan, North Dakota. And so what would happen is you'd have like people like us, whereas you'd have half your cousins were on the U.S. side of the border, and for them, half their cousins, us, would be on the Canadian side. It's like you came over and you had to choose one side, and it seemed like it was half and half. So as well too, right? So over time too, we have developed that is something in our recipe that is not necessarily found in other parts of Canada or anywhere else. A little cough break there for you. Guys, let me get more coffee into me while I slowly go on about... You know, I wonder if, guys, I notice you can set your YouTube to 1.5 speed if I'm talking too slowly. But I find a lot of Alberta people do speak slowly. I had an interesting thing, too. I was outside of Canada, and I was talking to someone about Alberta independence, and they had heard about it on the news. And they had said they thought that they were sure that they could tell I had an Alberta type accent. For me, I can't hear it. But I know there is like a way that Alberta people speak. And sometimes I feel like it's influenced by Newfies that came over in the oil patch. It could be, even though I don't hear it. And I think this time you don't hear your own way of speaking, which to you is normal. But I think it could be that people in Alberta probably do have something that is related to the type of drawl that you would hear in Texas. I think it's just I think it has influenced the way maybe Alberta prairie people talk, as well as the cold weather. And also we've taken part of that from Canada. And, you know, so I think maybe there probably is language. There's language, and yeah, maybe there could be some kind of a Alberta accent. I don't know. Tell me, do you think there is? I can't hear it. I don't hear it. I also have lived abroad and traveled a lot, so I know when I'm deep at home in Alberta, I probably do start speaking more like a rural Alberta farmer, but maybe I lost some of that accent, and it has to come back to me later. So, guys, that is a bit of the history. Oh, well, now let's go. We have... I think this is why they talk about rancher culture. You know, there's more to this, though, because what happens is with the American influence, Alberta is more American than people might think. Then would be Eastern Canada. So, yes, it's almost like our rivals are the Laurentian consensus, the Laurentian elite. But there is a lot of truth to this, that in the eastern part of Canada, they still have a much more European understanding of the world, which is, in this sense, is the way the European elites, and you know, this is from years of royalty and everything else, how they Yeah, people mistakenly think this as, if there's so much into equality, and Justin Trudeau will protect the people of Canada. The one thing I will do is protect our most vulnerable people. But actually, this goes back to a European, sort of a deeply entrenched part of Europe, which is that there is an elite class of royalty, and they will feed the poor. And what they'll do is they'll use a lot of social welfare programs, so as to keep the poor people satisfied. And as long as they do that, they're actually protecting their own Laurentian elite class. They're protecting themselves from, from having a French Revolution and having a bunch of angry people show up at their Thousand Islands cottages and burning stuff down. But they also protect themselves from having, they don't like the American idea that anybody can make it and that people could climb a social ladder. There's no kings. No, it's not that. It's just that they want to keep it so that there are two classes of people in Canada. And they really militate into that all the time. And I have seen that, interestingly enough, more than ever before, Canadians who need to make two classes. And Canada does have a de facto, it's not actually a registration number, but they are doing a very good job of keeping it so that there is a upper class and a lower class. And the upper class protects itself, especially too from, like any new money entrepreneurs climbing their way up. They want to make sure that doesn't happen, and they would much rather have, the other 80% of the plebs to just let them eat cake, and they will keep to themselves, and we'll keep to ourselves. Alberta, maybe because of the frontier spirit, because of the influence with the United States, because of the Western spirit of independence, which Alberta people had to have, and so did really all prairie peoples that went west. You had to try to be able to take care of yourself and only yourself, and then you did also have to learn to treat others well, because on the prairies at minus 40, there will only be another neighbor that is probably a good distance away, and you have to get along, and you have to treat each other equally. So there's some reasons why we're the way we are, and it's different from the way people in Eastern Canada will be. So that's another thing too, right? Is we will have more of a spirit of independence, and I actually think true equality. And I actually find that in Alberta, Albertans tend to, if they're wealthy or well-educated, and that's something else to talk about, by the way, is Albertans will not want to show that off to each other too much. And so I think that may have something to do with our prairie heritage and the way things happened. Now, the other thing I didn't mention was Alberta also does have, and maybe we can say by proportion, because I understand like out in the area of Toronto, for example, there were a lot of Mennonites. And I know there's different levels but Alberta does indeed have a high percentage and a great influence of the Mennonites, which I think they are actually allowed to use computers and phones now. I don't know every category, like there's some degree of technology that they can have. And then the Hutterites, and as well you'll find throughout Alberta, you will find that even people, I spoke to a German guy who had come to visit Alberta, and he was some professor of linguists or something like this in Germany, and he was visiting Alberta because he was studying. I guess they call it Low German. So how they speak German, because they enclaved. They came over, 150 years ago, and they were like a sort of a fundamentalist Christian people, and they enclave themselves, and so they speak a German that has since gone out of style in Germany itself, where I guess everybody speaks High German. That, by the way, is also a big influence. And as well, too, the Mennonites and the Hutterites, they have they also have to have this kind of unique spirit of equality, but also an independence, like a social independence spirit, because, they just live in these enclaves, and they live off the land. Guys, have I stopped trying to put this up my nose? I don't know. I have to tell you, I do have to use this microphone with this particular camera. So that's why I got my little chopstick microphone. Guys, I hope that is a hell of a long, rambling thing to get to what I wanted to originally was establishing, is that to avoid the cultural genocide, Alberta has, and by the way, for Saskatchewan neighbors, you guys need to think about this, because you might be the other province that still retains some of the pre-globalist New Canada. You still retain some of our culture. So we have to put a firewall of separating and being an independent nation, in order to stop people changing our much admired Dene people and Eskimos into elks. We have to do that as soon as we can, because it is eroding fast, and it will be deluged and washed out, which is, again, a strategy the Soviets use, and to this very day, the People's Republic of China uses that to wash out areas of ethnicities and cultures that they would prefer to Hanify, as we say. And so if you don't do this independence soon, I don't know if Alberta is going to be able to protect itself and its culture and what it used to be and what it used to values that it had will be, and if nothing else, will be just washed out with a massive import of whatever is the most opposite, and as well as the Eastern Canadian values. But we're not negative, are we? We're pretty positive, because it's the rise of Alberta. And I was listening to the Professor Bruce Party was talking about this. Have you guys ever thought that it would be something that in your lifetime you would have a chance to be a champion of the Western values, of Western culture, and you might be one of the last foot soldiers? But damn it, why don't you try? Why don't you try to do something amazing, which is, you might be Albertans. You might be the last stand champions who defend Western culture and values. It's you. It's on you now. And you have a chance to make that happen. And you know what? You're going to die a proud man. Yes, you're going to say, I did it. I did something. I did something to protect what all of my ancestors worked for, which is right and good. And I was there. I was there to protect that culture, and to maybe it wasn't just a defensive move, but there was a rise of Alberta and a rise in Western values. And there was a kind of cultural renewal and reinvigoration. And I was part of that. And I think maybe Albertans you've got a chance of a lifetime to do something great, to make the world a better place. And I think you should take it. And that's why I'm for Alberta independence. Thank you, everybody. I got to get my cup of coffee, and I got to try to wake up for a little bit. Oh, boy. There we go. Yo, I'm knocking this place over. I really got to get guys, I got to get a better light going on here, too. Okay, guys, see you next time. That's all for now.